Most South Africans know more than one language. We use different languages in shops, factories, sports fields, hospitals and classrooms. As apartheid crumbles and schools begin to integrate, classrooms are becoming a meeting place for Xhosa and Afrikaans, English and Sotho, Zulu and Tswana, Venda and Italian, Portuguese and Tsonga. Professor Rama Kant Agnihotri from the University of Delhi has worked extensively with multilingual classrooms. His ideas and work are relevant in our efforts to develop a multilingual approach to our education system.
I work with a voluntary organization called Eklavya in central India, which is known as Madhya Pradesh. The organization works with primary schools and in the areas of language teaching, science teaching, and social science teaching. A lot of what I have learned about language teaching and about multilingual schools is from my collaboration with these people in the rural areas of India.
At home in Khayelitsha, Cape Town, Charmaine Hoy, her family, friends and neighbors are all multilingual.
I speak English at school. I speak Xhosa at home. I speak Xhosa with my friends, sometimes English.
My
father's name is Mbulelo Moyi. He came from Grahamstown. He works here in Cape Town.
He serves the Newlands Clinic Dispensary.
He works in Newlands Clinic Dispensary.
He's a pharmacist. Assistant.
He's an assistant of a chemist.
Now there's theater, Xhosa, Nesingesi.
He can speak Xhosa and English.
Nes Afrikaans, no, not kakhulu.
And a little bit of Afrikaans.
Ulimi luthetha kakhulu sisiXhosa.
We speak Xhosa here at home, most language.
Kuba ndiyazi ukuba imini le uthetha isiNgesi nami ngithetha isiNgesi emsebenzini.
He knows that all day I speak English at school and he speaks English at work.
Ndiyacinga kubalulekile kakhulu ukuba asithethe isiXhosa.
I think it's very important so that I can speak Xhosa.
Njengoba ililwimi likamama wakhe.
Because it's my mother's language.
Kwaye ke xa sisemakhaya kufuneka sithethe isiXhosa phakathi kwabantu abakhulu abangasaziyo ezinye iilwimi.
And when we are sitting with our grandmothers so that we can speak Xhosa.
In Charmaine's neighborhood, many people speak more than 2 languages. Some speak different languages at school, at home and at work.
I mean, I can speak Sotho, I can speak Ndebele, Shangaan, Swazi, Zulu, Afrikaans and English. And then people around here also can speak Sotho, some of them, and Xhosa, and also English.
I mean, it's a myth. It's a Western myth, you know, it's an American myth or a British myth or a European myth that the world is monolingual and that monolingualism has some kind of association with scholastic achievement and with intelligence. Okay. The fact is that a greater part of the world is multilingual. I mean, the United States itself is multilingual now. Canada talks of the multicultural mosaic now, okay, today. And of course, if you look at China and if you look at Russia and Africa and India and rest of Asia, it's all multilingual, you know, which constitutes 3/4 of the world.
Charmaine Hoy goes to school with Katerina Mortarotti. Kathy's mother and father left South Africa in the early 70s. They lived in Italy and Venezuela. Now they have returned home. Their families speak a variety of languages.
Io dico quella in italiano, ok? La mia amica preferita è Bianca perché viene sempre qui a casa, mi ha invitato là a dormire, ci aiutiamo sempre, specialmente nelle verifiche. Mami non lo deve dire.
Kathy said that her best friend is Bianca And they're going to school together, they're playing together, they're doing their homework together, and she likes a lot Bianca.
It's so easy because in between one language and another one, you got many words, they look alike, you know, and then it was easy. English, I had to do it with my job, you know, because everybody was speaking English there. And then I always used my dictionary, but I got Latin and Greek too from school. I had to be a doctor, you know. If it wasn't for the war, I would have learned more. But I had Latin, Greek, Italian and French in school.
Speaking several languages has come naturally to the Mortorotti family. However, their youngest son, Jose, still suffers discrimination at school.
One morning he went to his class, he had Afrikaans, a selection, so Jose said, teacher, can you please help me with this Afrikaans? So he or she, I don't know if it was a he. So he said to him, look here, don't come and waste my time. If you can't understand Afrikaans, just go out of my class. And so he chucked him out of his class.
E allora lui mi ha detto, Luca ha detto, mammi.
Voglio sentire da te in italiano.
He had a few words to find, you know, the teacher did ask him to find these few words on the dictionary. And he did try his best. And
he did find
and then
one.
he did find one, you know. And then he did write it down and he went to the teacher to show him. She said, that's a word I did find. Is that right? No, but it's wrong.
Because he wanted many notes down.
Yeah. And if you're not able to find them, then you can just go out from the class.
Language is so central to all of us. And if your language isn't recognized, you actually essentially aren't recognized. And we talk about teachers as working from where the child is and building on that. If we're not actually acknowledging language, we're not acknowledging those children.
South Africa has a rich heritage of languages and cultures. The education system has failed to use this inheritance to develop students. Instead, educational policies have fostered negative language attitudes, racism and intolerance. The work of Professor Agnihotri focuses on how to use the multilingual classroom to assist cognitive growth and to fight racism.
Now, coming back to the classroom, you know, since multilingual societies are so complex and there are a variety of conflicting pressures in the society, it is natural that children and parents will come to evolve negative attitudes and stereotypes towards various languages and through languages about their speakers. Okay. So there is a very close relationship between the attitudes towards you have towards the language and attitude towards you have towards the people speaking that language.
St. Mary's Primary School in Cape Town is the first school in South Africa to experiment with the ideas of Professor Agnihotri. Ruth Versveld, an educationist with the Catholic Institute for Education, decided to apply his methods for teaching in a multilingual classroom.
Last year at the National Language Conference, I was a delegate for CIE and I actually listened a lot to what Rama had to say. So I thought about this. I actually thought this is quite important for South Africa as well. And we're not looking at language, we're not using that resource. I also felt it was quite a source of racism, that kids are coming into an English or Afrikaans medium school or even a cosa medium and being forced to speak those languages, and everybody else who doesn't speak those languages basically stupid or not doing as well or left out.
By definition, every classroom is multilingual.
My name is Rosalina de Freitas. I speak English in school. We take Afrikaans lessons. Then at home I speak Portuguese to my parents and English to my brothers and sisters.
My name is Kathy. I speak Italian at home. In school English. I did learn French in my Italian school.
My name is Geeta. I speak English at home and at school, and I'm learning Afrikaans.
My name is Lisa. I speak English at school, and I learn Afrikaans. I speak cosa with my cousin, and I speak Zulu with my father. I learned German and I dropped it, and English with my other friends.
Just to cite some few examples, like where I was teaching in the Transvaal, you'll find that in one class you are having a group of pupils from different ethnic grouping, like now the Swazis, the Beles, and the Sutus.
And I don't think the Indian educational system has been able to capitalize significantly on this very rich linguistic resource. And that is one of the sort of directions in which we are trying to make proposals and trying to conduct experiments, that how the multilingual situation can be usefully exploited in the classroom. You know, we can make some capital out of it in the classroom in terms of fighting language attitudes, in terms of increasing sensitivity to language structure and processes of language change.
Professor Agnihotri's method of teaching in a multilingual classroom centers around a weekly language activity class. The language activity class relies on the language resources found in a multilingual classroom.
So I think these are very interesting activities that you can do in a multilingual classroom, which is not a language teaching classroom, but which I would say is a language activity classroom, okay, where you talk about languages and you play around with languages. You see, language is a great source of knowledge, okay? And not only that, it also structures a whole lot of your knowledge. So children already have that knowledge. The data is already there, okay? So in the classroom, when you have children speaking 5 different languages, the teacher should be very happy rather than being anxious about it, okay? The teacher should feel that she has a very rich lab there. Okay, there's all kinds of data available. She should just know some techniques to elicit that data, to involve children in putting that data together.
They learn to think through thinking about language. It's actually a nice concrete topic. A lot of people would say it's not concrete, but it's in fact incredibly concrete, because you've got the words, you've got the children, you've got the backgrounds, all those sorts of things. And you can actually get kids to start to think logically and carefully through things. A lot of the work we've done is like collecting data, and then from those data extracting principles.
I think one of the things that can be done in a multilingual classroom, which I showed last year and now Ruth is doing in her school, I think is remarkable, that how you can increase children's sensitivity to other languages, particularly trying to show them that how other languages are as systematic, as well organized, as creative as their own language.
We started off with them really trying to find out a little bit about other languages that were spoken in the class. So they ran all over the show finding words for welcome from each other. And for once, and probably for the first time, the children who didn't speak English particularly, but had other languages to their names, were the ones who had crowds of kids around them looking for words for welcome, hello, that kind of thing. And immediately, you can see it in their books, they loved that, because suddenly they felt important and the center of attention. Then we wanted to look more broadly at the socio-political sort of situation of language and language policy, and then relate it to South Africa. And the way in which we did that was I gave them a topic which said, the world would be a better place if everybody spoke the same language. That was their topic. Those who felt that, in fact, yes, everybody should speak the same language, had reasons like, you can go overseas for jobs if your country ran out of jobs. Quite an interesting one here, if we all speak the same language, we wouldn't be able to gossip about one another. Then there were those who said, no, everybody shouldn't speak the same language. And they wrote these things down themselves. Remembering these are 11, 12-year-old kids, I was quite impressed. They said no, there will not be any culture. We would not be able to experience the different languages. They saw value in that. You wouldn't be able to teach everybody the new language. We disagree, because if the presidents of every country decided to change their language to English, all the people that speak a different language would want to speak their language, and that would cause a war. Anyway, we had the debate, and at the end we took a vote. Each group had a speaker and spoke for the points. And the vote was split 11-11 down the middle of the class of 22. End of lesson, break. I come back here into my room, which overlooks the playground, and the kids go out to play. And there is a war down below. They are fighting about language issues through the whole of break. End of break, couple of kids in tears. Okay. Next day I go in. So I sit at the front of the class, let them have their say, what they want to say. And for the first time they started to see that in fact both sides were right. In South Africa they actually need to learn other languages if they don't already speak them, which gave it quite a nice motivation for starting the cosa, which we then did. People aren't teaching cosa in the Afrikaans and English medium schools because they say they can't afford a teacher. And I actually wanted to show that that doesn't matter. You can actually use the children in the classroom as your resource, and teacher becomes facilitator rather than anything else.
We first, what is your name? And then we realize, what did you say again?
Ruth's language activity classroom at St. Mary's Primary School was the first experiment of its kind in South Africa. It shows that language attitudes can be changed.
And now there is substantial evidence that there is a very close relationship between intelligence, cognitive enrichment, cognitive flexibility, and your ability to cope with situation, your levels of tolerance and patience, and being multilingual.
Professor Agnihotri illustrated how a language activity class assists the cognitive growth of students. His lesson aimed to show students how plurals are formed in different languages, starting with Hindi.
Billi.
Billi.
Very good.
Billi.
Billiyan.
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 I just put this, maybe you don't know this, you know, little thing at the top. Rest you know, right? You can read the rest. Kutta.
Kutta.
Kutte.
Kutte.
Kursi.
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 Pari.
Pari.
Pariyan.
Pariyan.
Pari.
Pari.
Pariyan.
Pariyan.
The language activity class aims to maximize student participation. Students act as a resource, teaching the class plurals in English, Spanish, and Xhosa.
Dogs. Spanish, and also write singular plural.
Gatos.
Gatos.
Servientes.
Can you come and teach us some cosa word? I'll sit and write for you.
If there is more than one speaker of a language in the class, the students help to correct each other.
Ingango. 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 Ingango.
No, is that wrong?
Iwochi. Iwochi.
I want you to look at the Hindi examples. Can you look at the Hindi examples? So I want you to make groups like this. As many groups as you can make, and write the plurals here. Somebody is going to tell me, how do you make the plural in the first group? Can you tell me?
The two I's fall away and you add Y, A.
Can you show it? Can you show what is happening with the, take the example of kursi. Take the example of kursi.
Here are the double I's.
Yeah.
Then if you you take that away, you can see here the Y-A-A.
Absolutely brilliant, right? What he has done is amazing. Very good. What, do you use
The minimum of resources are required to teach a language activity class. It does not stretch the already overstretched education budget.
I would say a very intensive one-week teacher training program. That's all that is required. Essentially what one needs is patience, tolerance, and sensitivity to other languages. And I think average powers of observation and analysis. And that's what you need. And I think most teachers have them.
Yeah, I think it's very, very important that kids must be taught different languages, because at the end of the day, what you achieve, it's not actually them acquiring the language, but now it's a matter of actually developing that self-realization, self-esteem, and self-respect. And beyond that, you're actually teaching them to respect now people from different cultural background.
The most useful suggestion that I can make in the South African context is to say that start using these languages in the school for the community which wants that language to be used. And for God's sake, do not stop doing that because you do not have professional help. If a handful of professionals, professional textbook writers in English and Afrikaans, genuinely collaborate with Venda speakers or Xhosa speakers or Zulu speakers, I'm sure they'll produce textbooks which will be very good and which will be in those languages.
Okay, so we worked that out more or less. The word order.
People in positions of power often try to force others to speak their language. Ruth Versveld conducts a class to make students feel what happens if someone does not understand one's language. In the class, students were asked to imagine that they were identical twins and to invent their own private language.
Start off by inventing a name for your language. That's the first thing to do.
So it's a library. Read some books.
Okay, so with your partner or with your triplet, just invent the name of your language, and then I'm going to give you a sticker. And I want you to write it on nice and big and readable. Okay? And stick your language on. Let's hear a few language names.
Africo-Italiano.
What interested me in the lesson was that they actually instead of just choosing completely different languages, one or two children chose completely different languages, like Leanne, who stood up and gave that "where does the sun shine" question. But the others, actually, a lot of them combined languages and did a sort of compound of English and Swana and cosa, or German and English and Italian and...
So, I mean, there is nothing called a pure language. All languages are created by people through a process of negotiation with other people, and all languages borrow from other languages all the time.
They actually chose mixtures of language, which I thought was also a consequence of previous lessons, where we focused on the fact that there's no such thing as a pure language.
Think of any question that you would like to ask. It could be, where are you going? It could be something less likely, like, what's your favorite food? Or what are you doing over Christmas? Or why didn't you do your homework yesterday? Any question you like, okay? Don't tell them any information yet. Don't tell them what your question is, nothing. Just find a partner who's a different letter.
I tell you,
Et moi, Amy, on jouait, jouer. No. Did you almost last night? No.
Angelo, how are you feeling at the moment?
Down.
You want you to understand it. The action.
You can't do the action.
American man, like as the name was, there were dances with movements, and then this man can also talk to the Indians, and then they see looking for buffaloes, then they have to act like something like that. They for them was and then a cartoon cut, and he only knows the word that like it was all the things they was acting fun to the first man.
Let's just have your names one quickly. Mine is easy. You can't answer. Yo, dude, cosa, wena, yo, dude, wena, as means this again, yo, dude, you use in all the languages. You use yo, dude, in Xhosa, you use yo, dude, in Italian, you use yo, dude, in Afrikaans. That's yo, dude. And cosa, it's Italian. Wena, Xhosa, cake, Afrikaans, and Italian.
Most people don't even know one Italian word.
So what does it mean? Yo, dude, what you looking at? Just think for yourself. When I try to get somebody to understand me in a language that they don't know, what do? Do I talk?
These activities can make an enormous difference in the classroom, but they need to be incorporated into the national curriculum to harness the rich resource of languages in South Africa. A policy of multilingualism and language activity classes can assist the cognitive development of children and develop positive language attitudes, and most importantly, combat racism. National language policy should be altered to recognize the equality of all languages and their speakers.
A lot of schools to date have said no, nothing except English in the playground, for example, or Afrikaans. And kids get fined if they speak Xhosa or anything else. And this is still happening. It's happening all over.
Definitely. I mean, equal status of language will mean actually equality, socially. Because immediately we create now languages according to grade. We are creating now the superiority and the inferiority complex. So at the end of the day, if now languages don't enjoy equal status, what it means is that now even socially people must be actually classified according to the languages. So if they enjoy equal status, that will mean actually equality even socially, politically, economically.
So to say that any language is inherently superior or inferior, I think, is the first obstacle to be overcome by any multilingual country. I think that's absolutely essential. And the multilingual classroom that we talked about just now will go a long way, I think, in creating that kind of atmosphere, where languages are regarded as equal, but only functionally different, because they are being used for different functions.